Hello, and welcome to everyone who's joining us today. We're here for a session on Personal Agility Canvas by Dave Pryor. A little bit about this paper before we begin. Dave Pryor has been leading technology projects and teaching individuals and teams how to manage their work for over 20 years. He has managed projects, programs, PMOs, and has been focused on Agile since 1999. Dave's approach centers on finding a better way to help those who are making the journey from a traditional approach over to Agile. Dave's podcasts appear on Leading Agile and projectmanagement.com. The podcasts focus on best practices for transitioning from waterfall to Agile, as well as guidance and advice from other Agile practitioners. Dave now works for Leading Agile and leads CSM and CSPO classes. He's also a member of the Scrum Alliance TSA, and he lives in New York City. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, this talk is part of a series brought to you by Zoho Sprints, which is our Agile project management tool for product management teams. A few quick pointers before we begin. The session will last for up to 45 minutes, and we'll have a Q&A session in the end. If you have any questions, you'll find a tab on your left panel where you can post them, and Dave will be taking them up at the end of the session. At any point, if your video or audio is not clear enough, please try refreshing the page. That should help. Okay, now let's get to it. All of us are eagerly waiting to hear from you, Dave Pryor. So let me hand over the virtual reins to you.
All right. Thank you all for being here. We're going to go through a couple different tools right now, but I'm going to get right into it. I do want to ask one question really quick. So if you don't mind opening the chat window, if any of you are a PMP, could you type PMP into the chat window and just hit send? I just want to get a sense of how many of you are infected with the same sickness that I suffer from. I mean that in a lighthearted way. Okay, there's at least a few of you. If you don't know what a PMP is, I'm going to be talking a little bit about that, and that is a project management professional, somebody who's got PMI, project management certification. So let me just move right into the next slide. I want to explain why I put this stuff together. So I come from a traditional project management background. That's what I got started doing when I was young, getting started in my career. And I love traditional project management. When I had to move over to Agile, it was really, really difficult. It took me about 8 years to let go of everything I'd been taught. And I found that all the stuff that I studied to pass the PMP exam, to teach project management certification, it all worked against me, and it was really, really difficult. I don't think there's anything wrong with waterfall. I love that stuff. I think those tools are great, but those tools were built to solve problems that we don't have now. They were built to solve different problems. And all the stuff that Frederick Taylor did at Ford and stuff about optimizing workflow, that was built for a time that there were just different things going on than what we have now. But learning about how to succeed in things that, processes that would have worked great during World War II doesn't help me much today. Letting go of those things that I learned was not easy. If you think about a big company, like a bank, maybe a bank that's been around for 100 years, they have very deeply embedded processes, like from a process perspective, from a cultural perspective, from the way people think about their jobs, the way people get promoted. That stuff's really hard to change. And that's why you see a lot of organizations go through multiple rounds of Agile transformation. They're basically figuring out a number of ways to fail at it before they figure out how to make it stick. It's hard for a company to transform. It's hard for a team to transform. But I find that in the work that I do when I'm teaching classes and coaching people, that including with myself, the hardest part is actually transforming yourself. For me, it was letting go of everything that I had, taught was true. It was basically like I had a compass, and suddenly you told me that north was actually east. And I have to relearn how to do everything, and that's really, really hard. So that's kind of where this tool came from. What we're going to do now is we're going to walk through something called the 5 Measures Canvas, which is a tool I built from the book, The Art of War. And we're going to do that as sort of a way to prime you for the conversation we're going to have about Personal Agility Canvas and the exercise that we're going to do there. So what I'm going to suggest is if you're able to, if you go to the Handouts tab on the left-hand side, you're going to see there's a couple files there. The 5 measures canvas is the one we're going to use first. And then we're going to use the personal agility canvas after that. If you can download those, if there's a way for you to, type on a PDF or write on it, that would be great. If not, a sheet of paper or a text file, that's fine too. You can just answer the questions. But if you're willing to go through the process of filling this stuff out as we go through this, I think you will get a lot more out of this session than if you just watch. A lot of people are hesitant. They feel like they have to think things through. My experience has been that the best thing you can possibly do is not filter in any way and just put down whatever pops into your head. Even if you want to change it later, the fact that that was top of mind is significant. So I'd encourage you to, just do this on your own while you're following along. But I'm going to show you these 2 different tools. I'll explain why they're valuable and how I use them and how those things can be beneficial in your own adoption of agile processes. And at the end, we're going to talk about accountability partnerships. That's something that I've been doing for a really long time, specifically with this tool, but I'll explain why. And we'll offer you an opportunity to engage with each other as accountability partners if you'd like. So we're going to talk about the 5 measures. Now, this is a tool that I built from a book called The Art of War. If you're not familiar with The Art of War, it is really old. It's over 2,000 years old. If you look it up in Amazon, you're going to see a couple thousand translations of it. It is a book that is often attributed to a person named Sun Tzu, though there is some historical debate about whether or not that's actually a person or just a group of people that put this thing together. It's a military theory book, and it's been studied for forever. Napoleon used it. Anybody who goes through any kind of military program is going to have to study it. I found this book when I was very young, when I was in high school, and I just kind of kept going over it because there were things in it that kind of resonated with me. While the practices in the book were originally written as kind of guidance for warfare, what I found was that those tools can be applied in pretty much every single corner of your life. And it is, when I have a thing that I'm struggling with or any kind of problem I'm trying to work through, that book is my guide for every single thing in my life, except for one thing. So I'm going to show you how to use this tool. I'm going to suggest that you practice using it. Use it, when you're kind of thinking through this stuff on your own. Use it at work. Use it with any challenge you have, just to try to figure out how you can achieve the outcome that you're looking for. It's a really great process for generating results that you need. The one place that you can't use it is in your marriage. It's really, really stupid to do that. It causes you all kinds of headaches, and I'm speaking as somebody who tried that experiment and it didn't work out very well. Still happily married, but I've learned to leave Sun Tzu out of the conversation. Anyway, that's a picture of Paris Hilton reading The Art of War. Apparently she's read it too. But you can buy one about using The Art of War to manage unruly children, how to play golf, pretty much anything you can think of. I have in the handout section, there's another thing over here that says Art of War recommendations. While there are thousands of translations, there's 3 specific ones that I recommend people start with. If you become a student of this book, the thing that you learn is one translation is not going to do it. You have to read many different translations because they all focus on different things and approach things from a different angle. This is one of the earliest statements in the book, that war is the most important skill the nation can have. It's all about creation and destruction. You have to study this stuff. He's talking about war. I'm saying that these tools can be studied and brought to bear in any situation you face. They're always going to help you, and you must investigate the competition. Now, if it's business, competition is another company. But if you're trying to transform yourself, who are you competing against? Who are you battling against? For me, the agile part of me, or the part of me that wants to be agile, was battling against the part of me that was waterfall, that believed in traditional project management, that got a master's degree in that stuff, that taught people PMP certification classes. That stuff is deeply entrenched in my way of looking at everything. So there's sort of this internal war going on, and that's something that I had to figure out how to deal with. So the 5 measures, as Sun Tzu calls them out, are the Tao, the climate, the ground, the leadership, and the discipline. So I'm going to explain what these things are. I'm going to explain how they connect at a personal level, and I'll show you how they could connect organizationally as well. So this is the table that I put together to try to explain this. I have another Canvas tool that's built for PMOs. that are trying to figure out how to redefine their purpose so that they can be valuable in an agile organization. So that's why I've got your company as well. But the Tao is basically the way, the culture. You could say style. For me, it's just, certain companies, certain people, certain groups, they have a way that they do things. Sometimes it's an unspoken thing. But if you think about yourself, you could tie that back to your personal beliefs and value systems. Think about anybody who's famous. They have a certain way of going about doing things, or know a person that's just the way that they are, right? It could be something like that. That's true about you too. You have a way of approaching things. Climate and ground, I paired those things together. So if it's me in an organization, right, if I'm trying to figure out how to solve a problem at work, then the ground is the organizational structure that I'm living with. If it was battle, it's the actual surface that I'm fighting on. But in a company, it could be the org chart. Where do you sit positionally within the organization? Climate would be, in real life, in battle, it would be the weather. In a company, it's politics. If it's you at an individual level, it's whatever noise you have going on, like in your life. So noise, I would consider to be things that distract you, things that trip you up, things that get in the way. And if you're at work, it could be personal stuff, right? I mean, right now where all of us are working at home, there's noise everywhere. All this stuff on your desk that doesn't need to be there, that's distracting you, or Slack, or whatever else you have going on. All those things are competing for your attention, right? And the ground in this case is, where do you fit? Maybe you're a member of an agile team, maybe you're the leader of an organization, right? So where do you fit in the structure of trying to bring this stuff to bear? And then leadership and discipline, those two things are very closely tied together too. How do you lead yourself? And how do you like to be led? And how disciplined are you with the things that you do? I mean, are you somebody who says, I'm going to do X and you totally follow it? Or are you like my one friend who's on a keto diet, except for 2 or 3 nights a week when he goes out drinking and then stops at Taco Bell on the way home? He's not so keto then, but the rest of the time he totally is. There's a lot of companies that say, oh, we're deeply committed to a certain thing, and then they don't really show that in the way that they work. And that's not good or bad. Like, none of these things are meant to be judgments. It's just you trying to understand kind of where you are with these things, right? And again, this tool I use mostly when I'm talking about the personal agility canvas as a thinking tool, just to get my head in the right space to be able to answer the questions in the canvas. So this is the actual canvas itself for the 5 measures. And I would just start to write down whatever pops into your head. When you think about what you have going on around you, what's distracting for you? Are you super stressed about the pandemic? Are you one of those people who doesn't wear a mask and you think the people that do are silly? Or are you the opposite of that? What kind of demands is your family placing on you now that you're at home? What are you worried about? All those things could go into climate. Ground, obviously, where are you, with respect to your team and your organization and the agile transformation? How much say do you have in the decisions that are made? Disciplined, when you say, I'm going to do stuff this way, or are you able to follow through with it? Or do you want to, but you don't really? Because you got other stuff. I mean, there's plenty of reasons for that to happen, but it's something to think about. And then for leadership, what inspires you? And then Tao, how do you come to this stuff? What kind of mindset do you bring to it? A lot of people approach the idea of agility with like, oh my gosh, this is going to be awesome. I can't wait to see how this is going to unfold. I totally believe in the power of people. I was the exact opposite of that. I was dragged into this kicking and screaming. I didn't want any part of it. So maybe you've taken some notes on that. I'm going to move on to the next part. This was really, as I said, just more of a thinking tool to get your head in the right space to be able to move on. It is a really important part of this conversation, though, and I want to talk about why. So when I first started working through my switch from Agile or from Waterfall over to Agile, one of the things that was really hard for me was I'm used to Gantt charts with big, long schedules and everything's really detailed. And now there's Agile people saying we only plan things 2 weeks at a time, and that doesn't make any sense to me. And I felt sort of like I'd been thrown into the middle of the ocean, and the only thing I had to hold on to was waterfall. It's like a life raft made out of concrete. Like, it's not going to do anything but drag me to the bottom of the ocean, and I know that. but it's the only thing I have to hold on to, and I need to hold on to something because the only other thing around me is this agile person who's just waving their hands back and forth, treading water, going, "No, man, it's going to be fine. Just do this. We'll work it out." And that doesn't make any sense to me. So, letting go of this concrete life raft, that's the closest you can find to a picture of a concrete life raft, is really, really hard. I mean, knowing that something doesn't work, knowing that your Gantt chart is wrong, knowing that that traditional way of working isn't helping, knowing that multitasking has been proven to be physically impossible, doesn't stop people from wanting it to be that way. And that's really a really challenging thing, really difficult thing. So when I go back to The Art of War, where Sun Tzu says that you have to learn about your opponent, right? All that stuff that I have studied and learned and tried to master so that I can be really good at managing teams and managing projects, that's all holding me back. That's all baggage that's keeping me from being able to move forward. Now, one of the other things that's really famous from The Art of War, which you've probably heard paraphrased one way or another, is that if you know the opponent and you know yourself, you're always going to be able to be successful. Like, that's the most important thing. And a lot of people study their opponent, but they don't study themselves. So you might be very aware of like other people's stuff, but totally lacking in self-awareness. Or you might be the opposite of that. But the only way to really be able to prepare yourself for any kind of engagement is to study both and to try to be as honest as you can about both. Now, when we get into the personal agility canvas, one of the things that I'm gonna say is that there's an aspect of this tool that's very self-reflective. We want to be able to hold the mirror up to ourselves. And one of the reasons an accountability partner is so important to making this work is that no matter how honest you try to be, you're always going to be deceiving yourself. You're always cutting some corner, letting yourself off on something, or maybe you're one of those people that punishes yourself for things you don't need to be punished for. We can never truly see ourselves clearly, not the way that the rest of the world can. And even though you can't, I think you still have to constantly try. And I think having people that are able to help you get more clarity on that is really important. That 5 measures tool is just one step towards that. It's a way of being self-reflective and trying to take an honest assessment of, okay, I know I say I do this, but do I really do it? I know I say that I'm always going to go to the retrospective and be totally present, but sometimes I go in and I just don't care. I say I'm not going to open electronics or web pages when I'm in meetings, but yeah, I do. That's sort of the thing is, how disciplined are you able to be when the only one watching you is yourself? That's a really important part of this, and getting to a place of honesty with that. The reason that all this is such a big deal is because when you try to explain, this is a picture that the slide, that the header at the top says, this is what happens when project managers try to adopt Agile. It's sort of like this cat jumping off a ledge with no ground beneath it. We're all just hoping that it's going to work out. And for me, that wasn't really working. I didn't feel comfortable with that at all, because the plan is really important to me. I mean, anything you look up about planning, it's going to tell you, especially like the Eisenhower quote, that the plan is useless, but planning is everything. And that's definitely true. I mean, I always tell people in classes that, as somebody with a master's degree in project management, I feel somewhat comfortable saying with a feeling of expertise that anybody who gives you a Gantt chart is a gigantic liar. And that thing is usually put together at the most irresponsible moment in the life of the project. You will never know less than you do when you make that first Gantt chart. And yet we create it and people think it's going to happen. Now, I know it's not going to happen, but what am I going to do? Just not have a plan? That doesn't work, right? Then I'm like this cat, and I'm not willing to take that leap. So part of the problem with Agile for a lot of folks, especially the reason I asked about the PMPs, is if you come to this stuff with a deep background in waterfall, and we start trying to explain Agile to somebody with that background, then it's sort of like trying to explain the taste of oranges to somebody who's only ever eaten apples. They have no frame of reference for that. Right? I tell you to do things in relative estimation. It doesn't make any sense to a project manager at all. And I just wave my hands in circles and talk about outcomes and say it depends all the time. That doesn't alleviate any of the stress that management's going to have. And you can't tell your company that they're going to have to start planning the organization in 2-week cycles. That's not going to work financially. So there's a lot that you have to overcome, and a lot of it is anxiety. And this is why this personal agility canvas tool can be such a powerful thing, is because that anxiety that you feel, that nervousness, I mean, yeah, it's scary for the company, but on a personal level, if I still feel like I'm responsible for delivering, but I can't have a plan that I can trust, and you're telling me the old plan didn't work either, well, fine, the old plan didn't work, but I had a plan, and I could blame somebody for stuff, or I could try to fix the plan. But now we don't even have a plan except for 2 weeks, and that's a little scary for me. These are the different stages. You'll hear people talk about going through change. That's a really big conversation in Agile right now. You'll hear people talk about Satir and change models and things like that. These are my stages for project managers moving over to Agile. First stage, it's just total confusion and fear. You don't understand the language that people are using. You don't know what refactoring means. Why can't we just call it fixing things? Why can't we call them meetings instead of ceremonies? Like, none of that stuff makes any sense. And you just feel just lost. And then you get a little bit pissed off because the Agile people look at you like you don't know what you're talking about, right? I mean, I came into those conversations feeling like I had a bit of expertise in project management, and they talked to me like I was an idiot. And that made me mad. And I was frustrated that I kept being told my way of working was not going to fly. And there were little things, sort of like microaggressions for project managers. Like when you tell a project manager not to call people resources anymore, they take offense to that. In the same way that people that are human beings take offense to being called resources. A lamp is a resource, right? A human being is a totally different thing. A lot of people, in my experience, get to the point where they get to okay, yeah, right, because we're Agile. Okay, so I'll use these words and I'll say the things you want me to say, but I'm still going to think of everything like project management. I'm still going to want to assign all the work to people and stuff like that. A lot of people, that's kind of where they get off the train. They just kind of stop. But if you can move past that, you get to what a lot of people would call a child mindset. Everything's brand new, or maybe a growth mindset is another way to look at it, where you're willing to see things with a fresh eye, to say, okay, up until now, what I've seen is X, but there could be a different way. And then you get to this state of kind of abandonment and internalization. You hear people talk about shuha-re a lot in Agile. This is the re level. This is where, yes, there's lots of rules, and I know a whole bunch of them, and I know there's a bunch that I don't know, and it's okay, because I know what I'm doing now. And I know how to work through this stuff. And I know that maybe I can't tell you what's going to happen in 6 sprints, but that's okay, because I have a way of figuring out what to do when I get there, and I'll be able to make good decisions. Now, if you come from a project management background, there are some people that can do traditional project management or do Agile. I feel comfortable saying I can do both, but they're completely different value systems. It's sort of like one day you're playing jazz, that's Agile, and the next day you're playing classical music, that's traditional project management. And there's people that can do both, but most people, they're kind of stuck with one. And if they try to play the other, it doesn't really sound right. I know very few people that can move back and forth between waterfall and Agile. I don't know anybody who can do both on the same project. I don't know anybody who can be a project manager and a scrum master, or a project manager and a product owner on a project. That just flat out doesn't work, because if I'm a project manager, I'm concerned about the schedule. If I'm a scrum master, I'm worried about the team. And those things are not compliant a lot of the time. So I would encourage you to try to pick one or the other. And if you're trying to do both and it gives you a headache, that's pretty much normal. When I do try to act like a vampire that walk in sunlight, I have a headache the whole time. But it's possible. It just takes a lot of effort. So I know there's some questions that are popping up. I'm going to try to save those till the end. I'm going to move right into the agility canvas now. So this next part's going to take about maybe less than 20 minutes. We'll see. What I'm going to encourage you to do is, again, fill this out if you don't mind. If you're willing to, you'll get a lot more out of this experience. Even if you just want to make notes for yourself. You don't have to show anything that you're about to do to anyone else. Okay? It's really just for you. There's one thing at the end that I'm going to ask you if you're willing to share. It's still your choice. And I'll let you know before it happens. One last thing. As we go through this, I'm going to ask if anybody's willing to share what pops into their head. So if you are willing to share, maybe you can mention it to our hosts, and we can give you the mic for a second, and you can type it into chat, whichever's easier. You can just let us know what you came up with. So I want to walk you through this Canvas tool. Now, the Personal Agility Canvas is based on the basic layout of a business model canvas from Alexander Osterwalder. And I picked that format because I thought that it would be pretty familiar to people. I am around people that use this thing all the time, so I just assumed the entire world knew what it was. Turns out, not always the case. It's just a bunch of boxes, okay? You're just filling them out. I picked the format because I thought it would be familiar, like I said. So these are the different fields, and what I'm going to do is walk you through each one and try to explain what's going on in each box, and I'm going to show you the order in which I typically go through them. You can do them in any order that you want. I think that what you'll find is that what you put in one box will often make you want to change what you put in another box. And that's kind of what's supposed to happen. So these things are tied together. Also, just to mention that this is Creative Commons, so if you want to take it and change it, you're welcome to do whatever you want with it. If you ever have questions about it, you can go to my website, which is listed there. If you want to translate this into another language, that would be awesome. There's a guy who's working on translating into Persian right now. So I'd love to be able to get this put into other languages. All right, so let's start out. So here's what these boxes mean. I always start out with the strengths box, and I do that for two reasons. One is that's an area that I often forget to focus on because I'm a project manager and I really just want to talk about things that are broken. When I first created this, I showed it to a friend of mine and I didn't have that box on there. And she said, if you don't start out with something positive, these people are going to be so sad so fast, it's not going to work. We have to start out with something that shows we bring something valuable to the table. So if you think about moving from what you know about waterfall over to what you know about Agile, or whatever your idea of agility is, there's things that, you coming to the table for this, you are strong. You have skills, you have abilities, you have a mindset, you have awareness, you have something about you that is going to be valuable, something that's going to put you in a position of like, yes, this, no problem. All day long, I can do this. Maybe you are somebody who's really open-minded. Maybe you love the debate. Maybe you're somebody who's really great at motivating teams and getting them to being open to new stuff. Maybe you're great at convincing management of things, or, having difficult conversations with management. So that's what I would start with there, that first box of strengths. And I'm going to walk you through examples of each in a minute. So I'm just going to do these really quick. The middle box here, personal agile vision. This is the most important box to me. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about a more agile version of me, right? How is that person really valuable? If somebody came up to me and said, look, we're going to be having layoffs here because we've switched over to Agile, why should we keep you? What is it that you bring to the table that other people don't? So I think that's an important thing about understanding and establishing your worth and what you hope to be able to bring to the table. When we get to box 3, we're going to talk about the gaps between what you currently possess in your makeup and the pieces that are missing. Then we will talk about my favorite box, which is how am I my own impediment, the self-saboteur box. Each one of us does things that trip us up all the time. And this is part of that mirror, right? That's so hard to see. So we'll talk about that. Moving to this stuff is really scary for all of us. There's a lot of unknowns. We're at risk in our jobs and our careers, and in every conversation we have with somebody that we think knows more about Agile than we do. So what scares you about it? Everybody that I know has days where you leave work and you're like, I suck. I should not be. I mean, I'm in CST. I teach people Scrum all the time, like every day. And there's lots of days where I feel like I should just not be allowed to do this anymore. I'm horrible at this. Anything about Agile, anything that you do, you're going to have days where you feel like you're just terrible at your job, or you're broken down somehow, or something didn't work, or somebody yelled at you, or whatever, something failed. You're going to need people to pick you back up. And you're going to need to have those people ready before you need them. So that's what box 6 is about. 7 is about how are we going to judge our success. And then these last 2 boxes, these are the ones we're going to do at the end. What are you going to try to achieve over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months? And then who's going to help you figure out if you did it or not? about. So I'll walk you through each one with some examples real quick. As I go through, I'm just going to ask if anybody's willing to share. So I'm going to open up the chat window. And if anybody's willing to, you can either type what you're willing to share in the chat window, or it's probably the easiest way to do it, and then I'll just read it out. So, let's see. Trying to figure out how to navigate this. Okay, strengths. So, what do you bring to the table, right? What's the great thing about you? Maybe you're really patient. Maybe you hated waterfall. There's a lot of people I talk to when they talk about Agile, they're like, it was like they showed me the thing I'd been waiting for. Maybe management's totally behind this. Maybe you are somebody who believes in the power of people just rising to the challenge of whatever. Maybe you've seen this work. Maybe you've been studying it. Maybe you're just really comfortable with change. Like whatever that is about you that's a strength, that's what you'd put in that first box. So I'll give you a second here, see if anybody's got anything they're willing to share. I want to say hi to Sweta. Hey. And Austin. All right. Rachel said, I have a growth mindset and want to learn continually. Great. So that's really good. Anything like that pops into your mind is a great thing to put in there. And that's a good place to turn back to, when you have those bad days, like, what do I bring? I think that's an important thing there. Let me move on to the next box. So your vision, your personal Agile vision, right? Think about the more Agile version of you and how is that person different than you? There's a Gene Hackman movie called The Heist, and it was written by David Mamet, which is where the line comes from. But he solves this problem, and somebody says, how did you figure it out? And he said, well, I imagined I was a smarter version of me, and I did what that guy would do. This is that to me. This is like a more Agile version of Dave. What would he do? How would he be awesome? What would he bring to the table that would seem just going to fix the world? Why would somebody want to work with the more Agile version of you? Right? Maybe you're comfortable letting go of control. Maybe you're really good at coaching. Maybe you become super knowledgeable. Whatever it is, right? Whatever you're willing to share there, I think would be great. So let's see if anybody's got anything. My friend Raj. Pick on Raj. Always focus. Well, no, we need something positive, Raj. Okay, Sweta said it's being a little less attached to ideas. So, strong opinions loosely held. I'm guessing that's what you mean, Sweta. So we all have ideas, but if you're willing to let them be challenged, I think that's a really, really great thing. And it's a big part of being Agile, right? We have things we believe in, assumptions we make. We're always trying to test them, either prove that they're right or find a better way. So that could be a great thing. This is like a product vision statement for yourself. And this is something that, of all the boxes, this is the one that I come back to the most. Always trying to redefine, what I mean by this, right? What is it about me that makes me unique or special? When people ask about the classes that I teach, is that I come from a waterfall background. My transition to Agile sucked. And I do the job that I do to make that suck less for other people. And I speak both languages. And I think that makes me valuable. You've got something about you that's unique that makes you valuable. Now, this is where this whole thing actually started from, gaps to close. So I learned a lot about Agile. I knew that I had things that I didn't quite get. I still have things that I don't quite get. And when I'm teaching the classes, I always talk about the fact that I'm not an expert in anything. I've just been doing this stuff a little bit longer than the people in class. So the things that I don't understand might be different than the things that they don't understand, but we all have these gaps. Maybe it's a knowledge thing. Maybe it's an experience thing. Maybe it's a trust thing. I really want to be very theory Y in that I want to believe in the power of people rising up and doing great things, given whatever they need. But I struggle with that sometimes. For me, when I first put this together, there were some things that I needed to learn about. Kanban was one of those things. I didn't know anything about Kanban, and I felt nervous when I had to have those conversations. So that could be something, right? Maybe you don't know how to convince Agile to do this stuff. Maybe you need to be more patient. Anything like that, right? Anything that you've got to fill this space to feel like you're really good at what you're doing. So that's the gaps to close box. Let's see if anybody shared anything here. Oh, I like Catherine's. More agile than me can let go of control without losing my marbles. Okay, gaps. Dan said, thanks, Dan. Obsessing over perceived weaknesses, letting that insecurity corrupt moment-to-moment decisions. That's really, really good. That's a really good one. So those are things to think about, right? There's stuff we can fix. Now, the self-saboteur box. So I'm going to go back up to Raj in a moment. I am my own worst enemy. And I know that there's things I do every day that block me from being a better version of me. Raj says here, I've always focused on the goal of an outcome, but I shifted the focusing on the journey. In an organization that says it wants to be agile, it's really easy to see this kind of stuff. They say they want to do Scrum. They say they want you to be able to deliver every 2 weeks, but they've got everybody split across 5 different projects with 4 different teams. So nobody's fully dedicated to anything. So you can't really get the value of Scrum from something like that in a model like that. It's not going to be able to work. Maybe you're somebody who panics when you don't have a plan. There's one in here that is totally a thing that I have, constantly overcompensating for being a PMP and ignoring common sense. I've broken myself of that a little bit, but that was a really big deal for me in the beginning. I made a lot of stupid mistakes just because I wouldn't listen to common sense because I was trying to prove that I was agile enough to be in the room with the agile people. So that's a thing. There's other people that sabotage themselves. I had somebody in class recently who every topic we covered had to like chime in and bring up another topic that wasn't related just to show that they knew about more stuff. That person's not going to see themselves as a saboteur, but they are. If you need to constantly get validation from other people about how much you know or prove that you can be in the room, that can be a thing. One of my friends, he stresses out about, he knows so much more about Agile than anybody else I know, but he's obsessed with knowing all of it. And he's like in a state of like stress because he can't. That gets in his way. That prevents him from being able to do this stuff. So this is a really important box to me. All right, what are you worried about? What scares you about this? What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you try? Maybe you're going to fail. Maybe you're going to have to learn some new stuff. Let go of the things that you believe are true. These are really, big things. Maybe you think that you still have to give them traditional status reports or stoplight reports or whatever that is. There's one at the bottom here that was really interesting to me. I did this with somebody, and she said that she was worried she was going to misrepresent her faith. And that kind of really struck a chord with me because I hadn't thought of it that way before. But this does hit on a very personal level for a lot of people, right? I mean, you're worried about getting fired. You're worried about being bad at something. You're worried about looking foolish, but your own system of integrity, right? That's a really big part of this too. And I don't think we can separate those things. I think that part, when we approach this stuff, it's a big part of it. We bring that stuff to the table. So let's see, who's worried about something? Anybody got a worry they're willing to share? All right, let's see. Oh, that's a question. Look, okay, thank you, Christy. I'll never find an org that even wants to do this right. That's a really important thing. There's more agile jobs than there are people right now. I'm not suggesting anybody quit their job in the pandemic, but when the pandemic's over, if they can't do what you want to do at the company you're at, you have the option of leaving. I would say that for me, when I decided I was going to do that, I worked at a big consulting company, and I decided the most important thing for me was to really learn how to do Agile. It took 3 different companies before I got to one that could actually do it. They all said they could, but in practice, they weren't living it. And it took a while. So that's something that I'd be scared of if I had to go through that again. Because you might have to switch jobs a couple times. Now, the support system box is a really big deal. As I said, you're going to need people you can call on, people to mentor you, people to coach you, people to bounce ideas off of, people to call you out on stuff, people that are going to help you evolve. And most importantly, on those days when something happened that just came up and it's like they hit you in the stomach with a bag of oranges, you're going to need somebody who can pick you back up and straighten you out and head you back down the path. So maybe there's a group of peers, maybe it's family members, that person who was worried about representing their faith, they had a support group there. Maybe there's a coworker you can bounce ideas off of. Maybe there is somebody who's mentoring you. You need that. And this is a really important thing because you need that set up before you're in the moment of crisis. So I don't think you can get that thing put in place soon enough. That's like the first aid kit and the fire extinguisher. You never know when you're going to need them. But when the building catches on fire, you can't go, hey, we need to go get a fire extinguisher. You need to have that thing ready beforehand because everybody has those days and those moments where you just feel like you suck at stuff. You don't have to share this one if you don't want. And let's see if anybody did. Okay, I'm going to move on. Metrics. Metrics are really important. And metrics are also misused all the time. So how do you know when you get to, in quotes, there? Like, I don't think you can ever be, hopefully none of you are ever going to say like, yep, I'm Agile, I'm done. But maybe there's some things that would indicate to you that you've made progress. Maybe your team will stop laughing at your user stories. Maybe you can teach Kanban to somebody else. One person said, my heart rate remains below 100 when I'm in a room with Agile people. There was one guy I did this with, and he said he just wanted to not feel stupid when he was in a room with Agilists. So some of these things are going to be a little hard to measure, but you need to have some way of gauging it. You need to have some way of tracking progress. Otherwise, it's sort of like bringing something into a sprint that's going to take, multiple sprints to do, or that we don't have any way of knowing when we're done. Right? We have to be able to track progress so we can figure out if we're headed in the right direction. So that's basically the bulk of this thing. Let me see if anybody's got any good metrics they're willing to share. Qualitative metric of how many inspired days versus I suck days. So Dan, that's awesome. And keeping that in a journal is a really good idea. I did an experiment in personal Kanban that I blogged about, but I had a guy who was an accountability partner for me, and he made me sign up for this happiness tracker that multiple times a day would poll me to see like, how do you feel about what's going on? And I thought it was so ridiculous. But by the end of the experiment, one of the things that I learned was, even though I felt overburdened and stressed out a lot of the time, I loved all the stuff that I had to do. So it made me very aware of the fact that I was much happier than I thought I was. I was so busy thinking that I was overburdened that I wasn't taking the time to enjoy the stuff I was getting to do. So it did definitely, this stuff can help you gain new insights and can be really powerful. All right, so if you've been playing along, we're going to move on to the last two boxes here, and then I'll take questions. So this next box, and this is the part where you might have to share it with somebody if you're willing to. What makes this tool work so well is to come up with some goals and then get an accountability partner. So I'm going to ask that you just really quick jot down something you could do in the next week, in the next 3 weeks, and in the next 3 months to improve your ability, your adoption of Agile, your own personal transformation. And I'm going to tell a quick story while you do that. So I was at a conference one time in a session by Lisa Atkins. And if you ever get a chance to go to one of Lisa's sessions, you knock people down to get in the room. I go because she always makes me feel like super awkward and uncomfortable in a way that forces me to learn. Because it's very interactive and I'm not that kind of, I'm not a super interactive guy. So I was at this one session and we had to do all this stuff. And at the end, we had to come up with some goals just like this. And I was standing next to a friend of mine, Jesse Fuel. And I was thinking about the fact that I do this in every session and I never follow up. So I said to Jesse, listen, I would like you to be my accountability partner for this. And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, look, here's the things that I said I'm going to do. I'm going to do these in the next 3 months. I had 3 things. I'm going to do 1 a month. And if I don't do them, I want you to call me. And I want you to be like, if I don't call you and tell you they're done, I want you to check in and be like, what's up? Why didn't you finish it? Because I am the kind of person that, like, if I say that I'm going to do something and I tell everybody, like if I put that on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, I'm not going to do it. If I tell one person, like, so Raj is on the session here. Raj is a friend of mine. If I tell Raj I'm going to do something and I know that Raj is going to come back to me and be like, what's up? Why didn't you do it? I'm going to be so stressed out about that. I'm going to do it. Right? The guilt of it. Guilt is a very powerful tool. For me, anyway. I grew up Irish Catholic, so I'm sort of built that way. So I said to Jesse, here's these 3 books I'm going to read. Will you check in with me? And he said yes. And we left the conference. It took me an entire year to finish all the books. And I didn't want to come in contact with Jesse, which required that I avoid him. And that's not something that's easy for me to do. I have to plan to not see Jesse, or at least I did at the time, because we were kind of running in the same circles. So a whole year goes by. And I finally finished the 3rd book, and I called Jesse up and I was like, dude, I finished the books. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I did all those things I said I was going to do. He had no memory of it at all. But that didn't matter. The fact that I thought he did, that motivated me, that pushed me forward. But this actually does work better if you check in. So what I'm going to ask is, if you're open to having an accountability partner, maybe you can type that into the chat window, and maybe our host can find a way to help us connect you guys with each other. And what I would suggest is that after the session, exchange contact information with your accountability partner, and then get in touch with each other after the session and work out how you're going to stay in contact. 1 week, 3 weeks, 3 months. Capture each other's actions. And if I'm the accountability partner for Sweta, I'm going to call her in 3 weeks and be like, Sweta, what's going on? Did you get that stuff done? Do you need any help? How can I support you? Now, maybe her goals would change, and that's totally cool, but at least have the conversation. So part of this is, to be someone's accountability partner, you have to be willing to commit to them that you will be there for them, and you will support them, and you will challenge them and check in with them. But if there's something you can do to help them, you're willing to do that too. I've used accountability partnerships in a number of areas of my professional and personal life, and it is an incredible tool to help you get stuff done and improve. So I would strongly encourage you to do this. You don't have to if you don't want. But there, Pratika just said, please post I'm open, and they'll record this and they'll connect you with a partner if you need to. And that is the last slide. So I'm going to click onto this last one. You've got my contact. Oh, wait. No, sorry. There's the accountability partner one where I talk about the transformative power of guilt. Kind of mentioned that. And then the last slide. So I do a lot of podcasting. I do it for Leading Agile, where I work. I do it for projectmanagement.com. And they all show up on my blog, which is posted there. If any of you are somebody who's trying to get into being a Scrum Master or a product owner, but don't think you have the job experience you need, I just posted a podcast with a guy who was a DJ, and then he worked chopping down trees, and then he became a Scrum Master. And he talks in the interview about how those other 2 jobs taught him what he needed to know to be able to be a Scrum Master and a product owner. It's a really inspiring interview. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And that's it. So I'll take any questions you guys have, and I'm happy to talk to people after this as well, if you'd like. If you need me to do this presentation for your team, I'm happy to do that too. I really believe in this tool a lot, and I would love to share it with more people. So
A lovely session, Dave. I think I speak for everybody. The session was super engaging. And I think self-awareness is such a solid part of the personal agility conversation. It was lovely hearing you talk about it.
Cool. Thank you.
A lot of us were resonating, in the chat, people are going, oh yes, we should, more people should talk about the support systems. It was so refreshing to hear someone be so candid about their experiences and struggles.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank you guys very much for being here. I really appreciate it. Hopefully this was valuable. Thank you to Zoho for having me here. This was really fun.